Hello, my dear Frankenfriends, and welcome to Spookyou, your one-stop shop for all things ghastly and ghoulish. I'm your host, Barnabas Vixen, and we're finally out of quarantine here at the Spookyou Studios. Our vivacious voiceover virtuoso is COVID-free and feeling back to his old self. Or at least good enough to come into work and actually cut some lines. Seriously, I remember the Black Plague, and let me tell you, those that had it still found a way to make it into work. I think he's just lazy. Millennials. Anyways, thanks to our Wicked Weavers of Woe, we've got an incredible story for you all tonight. And thanks to my silver tongue, we've even got a fine feathered guest lending their voice to this video. That's right. Joining us is the ever wonderful As the Raven Dreams. His channel will be linked in the description below, so be sure to check him out. Now, on to tonight's story, which features both parts of this amazing tale. If you see a woman with a serrated smile, you need to read this as a matter of life and death. Written by Born Beach, whose links you'll also find linked below. Now, hopefully the gremlins have cut out all the coughing fits so that this narration sounds decent. Take it away, vivacious voiceover virtuoso, and I'll see you guys in a bit. I'm a government employee. My name isn't important. All you need to worry about is what I have to say. I work at a compound known as the facility. Within it, we perform research on things the public would find unappetizing. Officially, we're listed under experimental weapons development. But lately, our umbrella has spread much wider. Suffice it to say that there are things out there that go bump in the night. Things both legendary and mundane that exert their influence upon us and defy explanation. My job is to interview the individuals who believe they've encountered such entities and determine the validity of their experiences. This is one such interview. The room is cramped, dimly lit, and smells vaguely of stale piss and black mold. A light hangs above the table between us, rocking back and forth and doing a poor job illuminating much of anything. Still, I can see the man's face and the fields on my clipboard. It's enough. It'll do. I ask the man to tell me his story, and it begins.
It happened when I visited her cabin,
the man says. He's 29, with a long nose and 5 o'clock shadow. When he reaches for a cigarette, his hand shakes.
Not my cabin. It belonged to her, but she invited the three of us up.
To get away from it all? I make a note on my clipboard. 4 individuals. He nods, taking a heavy drag on the smoke.
Yeah, something like that. Get drunk, get stoned, forget life for a while.
He swallows, and his eyes dart to the cameras in the corner of the room. He scratches his cheek anxiously. It's a look I've seen before. It's better if you tell me everything, I say, placing my clipboard on the desk between us. Strictly speaking, I'm not law enforcement. I'm not here to have you arrested.
Sure,
he says. Another long drag. He taps a finger on the desk. Tap, tap, tap.
We were doing mushrooms too. At least Steven and I were.
That's fine. I check a box on my clipboard labeled intoxicated. Tell me about the event.
It happened late at night. The 4 of us had been drinking in the cabin, but we all slept outside in tents. Less spiders to deal with. The cabin wasn't exactly lived in year-round, so a lot of bugs would make their homes in it over the winter and spring.
Just to confirm, you used the mushrooms while drinking. I steady my pencil on the form, on the box beside intoxicated that reads disqualified. That's a combination inviting hallucinations.
Look, it wasn't hallucination, all right?
The man seethes for a moment, clenches his hand into a fist while his lips make a thin line. Then he takes a breath and regains his composure.
Sorry,
he says.
Thinking about that night puts me on edge.
Understandable, I say. Such reactions are to be expected after witnessing an event. Now then, if you wouldn't mind clarifying my earlier question, did you consume the mushrooms while drinking? He shakes his head.
No, the mushrooms happened several hours earlier. They weren't even a factor when...
He trails off, his eyes gazing at the ashtray on the table between us. There's an emptiness to them, a sort of disconnect. I wonder if he's thinking of the legend I suspect that he's encountered. I wonder if he's thinking of Jagged Janice. I clear my throat. They weren't a factor when the event occurred?
Yeah, they'd worn off by then.
You're positive? He gives me a look of disbelief.
No, I'm fucking lying to you for the fun of it. Yes, I'm positive.
Aggressive behavior, I remind him, will not be tolerated. He opens his mouth and words hang there for a moment. I've done enough of these interviews to know that there's more that he wants to say. Or maybe yell. He doesn't though. Instead, he takes another breath, leans back in his chair, and apologizes.
Look,
he says,
I know what I'm going to tell you is gonna make me sound crazy or high or whatever the fuck else. I promise you though that it happened. And seeing as you're the one who came to me for this interview, the least you can do is listen.
I nod. Of course, entirely reasonable. I circle the word irate on my form.
What are you writing?
The man asks, leaning forward. He narrows his eyes at my clipboard as I pull it away.
Why won't you show me?
It's against protocol. Your knowledge of my notes could influence your account. I'd prefer if such biases were avoided. Now please, continue. He licks his lips. They're chapped and cracked.
Fine,
he says.
Like I said, we were drinking in the cabin, swapping old stories from high school, talking about stupid pranks we used to pull, or places we'd all hang out, or shitty teachers that we hated. You know, we reminisced.
His finger taps the table. Tap, tap, tap.
Pretty soon, we got really drunk. The sort of drunk where you stop goofing off and things go deeper. We start talking about our hopes and dreams, about our pasts and futures. You know, the kind of shit that sets your soul on fire.
That's very poetic, I say. Are you a writer?
Sometimes.
As such, would you describe yourself as having an active imagination? He sighs and shakes his head.
I would describe myself as in the middle of speaking. Thanks.
I press my pencil to the clipboard. Undetermined.
So, we're all drinking.
He continues.
And Emily gets really low all of a sudden, like mood-wise. She seems down.
Emily being the woman who inherited the cabin? He nods.
We ask her what's up, not to be pushy or anything, but just like, as friends, you know? I mean, fuck, we've known each other for over 10 years at this point. We care about each other.
What does she tell you? He looks down, and there's a melancholy in his expression.
She tells us why she never invited us out there before.
I scratch a note on the form, straightening up in my chair. That reason being?
Her brother died when they were kids. He drowned to death in the ocean.
I frown. It doesn't match the legend. Anything else? He glares at me.
Are you serious? Anything else? Yeah, that's it, asshole. Her brother died and the place reminds her of him.
A sad story, but not why we're here. I check a box labeled confrontational. Please, continue. He takes a few moments to think about it. His jaw is clenched and his eyes are boring into me. Eventually, he takes another drag, breathes out a plume of smoke, and speaks.
Like I said, We were drinking, talking, but like all good things, it comes to an end. Emily stops first. She decides she's ready to head to bed, that she's had enough to drink, so she heads back to her tent. That leaves me, Steven, and Haley. Haley's passed out on the couch, and Steven and I chat for another couple of hours, but eventually we both decide it's time to get some shut-eye too.
I nod. So far, nothing mentioned warrants the facility's involvement, but I'm keeping an open mind. The police report sounded like Janice after all. According to the police report, I say, rolling my pencil in my fingers, the cabin is where the event occurred. Can you describe it for me, the layout?
Sure.
He scratches the back of his head and furrows his brow. His pupils dilate and focus, as though recalling a memory.
It's sort of a T-shaped, capital T. It's got 2 bedrooms on either side of the T, with a bathroom at the top center. Then there's the living area in front of the bathroom, and finally at the bottom of the T is the kitchen and the front door.
You said the event occurred in the washroom, correct? He takes another drag on his cigarette, burning it down to the filter. His eyes are bloodshot.
You got any more of these?
He asks. I reach inside my jacket and pull out a pack, then toss it to him. He eagerly flips it open, slips a smoke out, and lights it. So the 4 of you get into your tents. What happens next? He shrugs.
I read my book.
Your book?
Yeah, Mistborn. Ever read it?
I shake my head. I don't care for fantasy. What happens after you read the book?
Nature calls. I gotta take a shit, so I get up and head to the cabin. It's pitch black outside when I unzip my tent. I can't even see my feet on the ground.
Pitch black? Or had your eyes simply not yet adjusted?
Pitch black,
he says flatly.
The cabin's on a tiny island off the coast of British Columbia. The only light it gets is the moon, maybe the stars. That night it was overcast, so the moonlight came and went with the clouds.
You carried a flashlight then? He shakes his head.
No, just my phone. I use its light and make my way to the cabin. Once I get inside, I shut the door behind me and I get a weird feeling.
Can you describe the feeling?
Like I'm being watched.
Promising. Continue.
The place feels empty, lonely. It's just me, the spiders, and my phone.
He pauses.
The lights making shadows out of everything. The dusty fridge, the messy shelves, and the cluttered counters. There's 1,000 shapes all around me, shifting as I walk, and this feeling of, I don't know, dread comes over me, like I'm not safe.
He clears his throat.
But I'm drunk enough that the feeling doesn't do much to faze me. I shake it off, I laugh a little. I came to take a shit and some spooky shadows aren't gonna stop me, right? I guess they call it liquid courage for a reason.
He laughs at his own joke.
A few seconds later, though, I'm in the bathroom and locking the door behind me.
His leg's bouncing under the table, and it's shaking the top of it. Would you like a glass of water? I ask, pouring him a cup. I recognize the anxious body language and the incessant licking of his lips. I've seen it before. He waves a hand dismissively.
No, I'm all right,
he says, but he reaches across and takes a sip anyway.
So I'm about to unbuckle and do my business, and I see movement. It's in the top corner of the bathroom, in one of those little toilet windows, like the type that's clouded on the bottom for privacy, but clear on the top to let in the light.
I've seen those, I say, nodding. I have one in my bathroom. Is that where the event occurred? He nods, running a hand through his dark hair.
That's where I saw the smile.
Jagged Janice. Describe it, please. He shakes his head.
I'd rather not. Can we just discuss the event?
The smile is a part of the event, I remind him. It's important that we get as many details as possible, no matter how uncomfortable those memories may be. He looks down and his eyes drift out of focus. He's remembering it. The smile.
It was a row of teeth. Except the teeth were too big and too sharp to belong to a human, and there were just so many of them.
I look down at my notes. I read over the description of Jagged Janice, as mentioned in old email chains from the early 2000s. I'd like to hear more about her teeth. He bites his lip.
Her teeth? Why?
The teeth are important. Describe them, please. He's uncomfortable. His voice cracks and his chest sighs, but he gives me what I want.
The teeth were jagged, serrated almost. Their length was all over the place. Some barely broke her gums, others stretched down, piercing her bottom lip.
His fingers move again. They're tapping on the metal table. Tap, tap, tap.
When I see the smile, my heart starts pounding. I'm frozen there, standing in the dark with just the light from my phone. My mind's reeling, but I know whoever that smile belongs to, I don't want them seeing me. So I hold my phone to my chest and extinguish the light.
Did the woman showcase an adverse reaction to the light? Janice, according to her legend, loathed light.
No, or I don't know, maybe? I can't remember small details.
He's sweating now, his eyes transfixed on the cigarette burning low between his fingers.
At that point, my body is mostly just adrenaline. I feel a storm of it coursing through me and screaming at me to run or to fight this bitch or do something, anything. But I can't. I just stand there staring at her inhuman teeth, at her horrible, twisted smile with my phone clutched to my chest like a Christian cross. Then, the smile begins to fall away, lowering itself until it's obscured by the foggy part of the glass. In its place are 2 eyes.
He takes a breath.
They're wide, angled, all wrong, and leaking black fluid. They dart around the washroom as if looking for something or somebody. I stay still, paralyzed. There's no light save the moon framing the monster in this window. So I meld into the darkness and I pray to fucking God the creature can't see me there. I feel dribbles of piss run down my leg. I'm panicking now completely and I'm losing control of my body.
He shivers, taking another long, slow drag on his cigarette.
Then I hear the tapping on the window. Tap, tap, tap. It's followed by this chattering sound, and I realize it's her teeth gnashing together. Open and shut, over and over again. I don't want to look at her, but part of me can't stop myself. I glance up at the window and I see her eyes staring back at me, these 2 tiny black dots in a sea of white. My breathing stops, my pulse races. It's just the 2 of us now watching one another.
I lean forward, interested. Much of that description could have been pulled from the Jagged Janice legend itself. The tiny black pupils, the rows of inhuman teeth, the gnashing jaws. I check off the features on my clipboard as I go. What happens then? I ask.
Then, she speaks. It's only 3 words, but it's enough to turn my dribble of piss into a torrent.
He swallows, his eyes wide as he recites the words.
I see you.
I write them down and circle the words 3 times. They're not familiar to me. Did she sound young or old? Describe her voice. He shakes his head, shuddering.
The voice was quiet, hard to hear. The words sounded like they'd been pulled out of a wood chipper. The pronunciation was broken and unnatural, like they'd been cut up by those teeth.
Curious, I mutter. Continue.
Her finger reaches up and she taps on the glass again. Tap, tap, tap. I chance another look, and all I can see is that terrible serrated smile. I look away, but I know I need to watch her. I have to monitor her because who the fuck knows what this creature is gonna try. So I look back up, but the smile's gone, and so is the woman. It's just me.
He puts his face in his hands and his shoulders shake with silent sobs. A minute passes. It appears we've reached the end of his account. A harrowing experience, I say, giving my notes a final swipe with the pencil. I straighten up in my chair, flattening the front of my jacket, and reach out to shake his hand. On behalf of the facility, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to share it with us. His sobs taper off and he's quiet for a moment. Then he looks up from his hands, and his eyes are red and his voice is shaking.
It's not over,
he says.
There's more.
I pull back my handshake. My apologies. Something else occurred?
Yes,
he says.
The next few hours turned into a nightmare.
Glad I caught you, dear listener. I've got an important announcement. We here at Spookyou, well, more specifically, I, have partnered up with Post Brand Cereals to bring you a nutritious and heart-healthy breakfast blend. Introducing Barnabas Flakes, an important part in a balanced breakfast. Why, they're graciously coated in a synthetic sugar that almost tastes like the real thing. With key vitamins and nutrients that have been woven together from various animal and plant specimens in a lab deep under the earth, why would you ever need to eat anything else? Barnabas Flakes are here to curb that appetite and completely replace your meal regimen. Just a bowl at breakfast, lunch, and dinner will satisfy your most basic needs. And the best part? There's a prize in every box. I mean, who doesn't like surprise organs and bone matter? We sure do. Call now and we'll throw in 3 boxes for the price of 4. Just use the code phrase, "I pledge my life to your cause," when the operator asks. Barnabas Flakes. Hear me and obey. Spookyou is not responsible for any abnormalities nor any fatal side effects that may occur upon consumption of our cereal. Blackouts are completely normal, as is complete obedience. Please consult your doctor if you begin growing hair in places you wouldn't expect. Processing and handling charged separately. He puts his face in his hands and his shoulders shake with silent sobs. A minute passes. It appears we've reached the end of his account. A harrowing experience, I say, giving my notes a final swipe with the pencil. I straighten up in my chair, flattening the front of my jacket, and reach out to shake his hand. On behalf of the facility, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to share it with us. His sobs taper off and he's quiet for a moment. Then he looks up from his hands, and his eyes are red and his voice is shaking.
It's not over,
he says.
There's more.
I pull back my handshake. My apologies. Something else occurred?
Yes,
he says.
The next few hours turned into a nightmare.
I settle back into my chair. Already, there's plenty of details that indicate the presence of Jagged Janice on that sleepy island, but I could always use more. The man clears his throat, and I listen intently as he resumes his account.
It takes 10 minutes for me to muster the courage to crack the bathroom door. I do it gently, quietly. You can hardly hear the shitty hinges creak, that's how careful I am. I peer out of the crack, looking for the smiling woman, terrified that I'm going to see her standing in the living area waiting for me, but I don't. Nobody else is in the cabin, it's just me. So I step out across the hardwood floor. It creaks and groans with each step I take, and each time it does, my heart skips a beat, and I expect to see her jump out of the darkness.
He shudders.
I'm seeing that smile everywhere now, in every shadow, in every window. I want to shout and scream. I want to call out to my friends and beg them to pull me out of this horror, but there beyond the cabin door, out there at the far end of the yard, they're a world away.
Just a moment, I say, placing the clipboard down. You never thought to use your phone to call for help?
Weren't you listening?
He says.
I was on Backwater Island off the coast of rural BC. I didn't even have spotty service. There was nothing. My phone was a glorified fucking flashlight.
Thank you for clarifying. I mark on my clipboard to investigate the service signal in the area. If it turns out that there is cellular service, then it's possible he's lied about other aspects of his account. A disappointing prospect. Continue.
Our tents are in the far end of the yard, so I'm psyching myself up to book it out the front door. I've got my hand on the knob and I'm ready to fling it open and scream bloody murder. And that's when I hear it.
His fingers thrum the metal desk. Tap, tap, tap.
I look at the window beside the front door and I see a long arm in a frayed sleeve. with crooked fingers playing against the glass. They're drumming a melody, but it's discordant. Strange, it's not music, but more like noise masquerading as song.
He drops his burnt cigarette into the ashtray and reaches for another.
I hear her voice again. "I see you," she says, in this gravelly, guttural tone. The tapping gets faster, heavier. I pull away from the front door and fall back to the shadows of the cabin.
He lights the smoke and brings it to his lips, then pauses.
I see her head crane down to the window. Her eyes gleam in the moonlight, darting around, swiveling in ways they shouldn't be able to. She's searching again for something. For me, maybe. I don't know.
He pulls on the cigarette, coughing as he spits out a lungful of smoke. I slide the glass of water across the table toward him, and he picks it up and slams the entire thing. When he's finished, he wipes some wetness from his chin and continues.
Then, she's gone.
Again? I ask, mildly exasperated. There was no part of Janice's legend that indicated her vanishing. He nods.
I'm alone, and time passes. Minutes, maybe hours.
He shakes his head.
I just sit there in the living room, my ears and eyes straining for any sound, any movement, anything. I'm trembling and breathing in short bursts, terrified if I breathe too much or too heavily that she'll hear me. I wonder how long it's been. I wonder how long until morning comes and somebody wakes up and comes to check on me or use the washroom. I think about using my phone to check the time, but the idea of its backlight revealing my position terrifies me, so I don't. I leave it be, and I sit there a while longer.
I make several notations on my clipboard. Terror, inability to move, shadows. I circle the words with a sigh. Sleep paralysis? I look up at him, wondering how likely it is that this whole experience may be nothing more than a bad dream. Still, the possibility of it being a true account is too valuable to ignore. So then, did you wait until the morning? He laughs. Another drag.
Fuck no,
he says.
It took a while, but eventually I had enough. I got calmer, or maybe just more desperate. I don't know. Maybe I just needed to know that my nightmare had an ending.
I make a mark on my form indicating him referencing the experience as a nightmare. Beside it, I scrawl the words, confession, sleep paralysis. So, did you check your phone then?
Yeah.
He gnaws at his fingernail, a nervous response, often correlated with lying, but not necessarily.
I'm quivering as I pull the phone from my pocket. My finger presses the power button and my home screen comes to life. It's a stupid Sonic background, and it bathes my face in a blue glow.
What time was it?
It was 3:34 a.m., about 2 hours from sunrise.
He takes a breath, long and deep.
So, I put my phone back in my pocket, deciding that I can't wait another 2 hours. I need to do something now before that woman comes back. I tell myself to make a run for it. First, though, I need to wake up my friends. I don't want to make myself an easy target, so I open my mouth to scream and run headlong out the cabin door and towards the tents and maybe make it out of there alive, and...
He pauses, tears coming down his face. He's whimpering now. I tap my pencil rhythmically on the clipboard, my impatience getting the better of me. And
a hand, long and crooked, wraps itself around my mouth. Something pulls my head back, and I smell rot and decay, and a voice whispers in my ear, "I see you."
I raise an eyebrow. But you got away? He shrugs, ashing his cigarette in the glass tray.
I guess so. I blacked out. When I woke up, it was in a hospital bed surrounded by my friends.
The ones from the cabin?
Yeah.
I check the box labeled Survivor. I chew on the eraser of my pencil for a second before checking one more box. Post-traumatic stress affected.
They're all telling me it's their fault,
he says.
Emily's mumbling about how we never should have come out to the cabin. Steven's talking about how he and I should never have done mushrooms that afternoon. Haley's blaming herself for dozing off and letting Steven and I get exceptionally drunk.
He gives a bittersweet smile.
Everybody wants a share of the guilt.
One might say that they've earned it, I say, hardly masking my disappointment. It's possible that you did have a case of hallucinatory distress.
I don't think so. At that point, the mushrooms had worn off hours ago. Hell, by the end of it, I wasn't even still drunk.
I make a note on the form indicating the subject believed themselves sober at the time of the event. You said the island was quite remote. I'm assuming the hospital wasn't local to it?
No, it was off the island, an hour or so inland.
The man takes a breath, as though happy that the hardest part is over.
I must have been out for a day at least, because I don't remember traveling there.
My interest peaks again. A recurring aspect of the Janice mythology is a sense of mild amnesia, as well as the presence of minor to severe bite wounds. What did the hospital treat you for? He coughs, clearing his throat.
A mild concussion, as well as water in my lungs.
Water in your lungs? I toss my pencil down in disbelief. Seriously? He shrugs.
The doctor didn't understand either.
Okay, so your friends leave get well cards, you get discharged a couple days later, and now you're here. I lean back in my steel chair, folding my arms. Is that pretty much it?
Not exactly,
he says darkly.
Before they left, I mentioned the smiling woman to them.
I sigh, leaning forward. Could you use the exact phrasing?
Sure.
He shifts, uncomfortable.
It's when they're apologizing, taking the blame for everything. I interrupt them and ask them a question, but my voice is like sandpaper, so I have to do it twice. There was a woman, I say. She was smiling in the cabin window. Did any of you see her? Steven and Haley shake their heads. They rub my arm. They tell me I was tripping. They tell me it was a mistake to mix mushrooms and alcohol. They tell me this is their fault all over again, like they're not listening to a word that I'm saying. But Emily is standing back. She's staring at me, and her eyes are filled with something like regret. Her hands find her pockets, and she buries them and looks away. I say her name. She knows something. I can tell. She's seen the woman too, maybe.
My pencil slides down the interview form, circling a word that says witness and annotating it with a small question mark. Did you confront her about this?
No,
he says with a sigh.
She left the room too quickly. I don't think she wanted to speak about it. At least, not in front of Haley and Steven. That night, I was alone. My hospital room was cramped and silent. The only company I had was the apple tree outside my window. It took me a long time to fall asleep, but eventually I did.
I settle back into my chair, folding my arms and listening. It feels as if this might be nothing more than a hallucination after all. There's simply too many departures from the mythology.
I woke up to tapping, the sound of fingers on glass. My eyes snapped open and I stared out the window, fucking horrified. But it was just the apple tree. Some of its branches were brushing against the window and making a tapping sound.
He chuckles.
So I roll over and go back to sleep, wondering if this was what my life was going to be like from now on. You know, panicking every time I hear a branch on a window or a face in a window. And that's when the door creaks open.
I frown. To your hospital room? He nods.
I start freaking out. My breath hitches in my chest, my body tenses. I know that this is it. The smiling woman's back for real this time. But it's only Emily. She pauses in the doorway and asks me if she can come in. I tell her of course, and she closes the door behind her. She doesn't bother turning on the light, and as she draws closer, passing through the shafts of moonlight, I see her eyes heavy with bags, her posture slouched, and the wetness of tears on her cheeks. She looks exhausted, devastated. "I'm sorry," she says, wiping snot on her sleeve. "I'm sorry, I thought she was gone."
So, I say, flipping back a page on my clipboard. She knew about the woman after all. I found the spot I'd annotated witness and erased the question mark.
Yeah,
the man says.
She said a woman attacked her brother when they were both kids. She said the memory wasn't great because she was maybe 4 years old at the time, but that she remembered him being dragged backwards by his face. She said the woman was smiling the entire time and kept repeating, "Into the sea with you," over and over again.
The man pauses, his voice getting lower as he speaks.
The woman held him beneath the surface until he drowned, and then she let the waves take him.
Disturbing. I tapped the pencil thoughtfully against my chin. And she never brought this up to her parents?
She did. Her father told her it was just her imagination. He said that her brother had fallen into the ocean and gotten swept away, and it was already hard enough to deal with without Emily adding to it, so Emily just buried the memory and moved on.
The man looks up at me, his expression despondent. Then he brings a fingernail to his mouth.
And that's when we heard it.
He says.
In the hospital room, tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the window to my right, the one with the old apple tree.
Was it the woman?
I don't know.
He shrugs.
I didn't look. I told her not to look either. Emily. I told her to just look at me, focus on me. I didn't know what she saw as a little girl down by the ocean, but I knew I didn't want her to see what I had seen.
He shudders.
I didn't want her to see that smile.
Did she listen to you? He shakes his head, slowly, unhappily. His hand grips a fistful of his own hair.
She looked, and when she did, she screamed. She screamed so loud that the lights came on down the hall, and I heard the overnight nurse call out. Then Emily rushed to the window, and I still refused to look, but I heard her beating against it with her fists, clawing at it with her nails. The nurse burst in shortly after and found Emily weeping on the floor. He pulled her out of my room and got a patrol car to drive her home.
The man takes a breath. He puts his face in his hands and rubs his eyes.
I texted her shortly after.
He says. Yes. I look at the folder on my desk labeled correspondence and then down at the watch on my wrist. It's already more than a half hour past the end of my shift. If the texts are everything that's left, I can read them on my own. I rise from the desk and offer my hand to shake. He gives it a weak squeeze, avoiding my eyes, then leaves the room with my pack of smokes and not another word. I sigh, sitting back down in my chair. Another long day. Another dead end. I adjust my glasses and pull out the text logs. There's only one sheet with a handful of message receipts. The chance is slim, but the possibility that there's something in there about Janice entices me. The allure of having years of my personal research validated proves too much to resist. I begin to read. And as I do, I make out a note of the timestamps. In my experience, they often paint a picture deeper than the word. 1:34 a.m. Dorian. Are you okay? 2:12 a.m. Emily. Not really. 2:12 a.m. Dorian. Did you see her? 2:45 a.m. Dorian. I'm sorry, that was a stupid text. 2:45 a.m. Emily, it's fine. 2:46. Dorian. I'm guessing you don't feel like talking. 2:46 a.m. Emily. Actually, it might be good for me too. 2:47 a.m. Dorian. Yeah, me too. 2:47 a.m. Dorian. I never got a chance to tell you earlier. I can't imagine how horrible it must have felt. 2:47 a.m. Dorian. To see what happened to your brother and have your dad not believe you? That's fucked. 2:55 a.m. Dorian. Unsent. My bad, we don't have to talk about heavy shit if you don't want to. Did you finish your book on 2:55 a.m. Emily? It's fine, we were never close anyway. 2:55 a.m. Dorian. Sorry to hear. Did you ever tell your mom? 2:56 a.m. Emily. No, my mother was already dying by then. Dad would have killed me. 2:56 a.m. Dorian. Fuck, I'm an asshole. How could I forget something like that? Sorry again. 2:57 a.m., Emily. You're not an asshole. As long as I've known you, Julie hasn't been my stepmom. She's just been my mom. It's fine. 2:58 a.m., Emily. I'd honestly be shocked if you remembered anything about my birth mom. I mean, even I hardly do. 2:58 a.m., Dorian. Thanks for trying to make me feel like less of a dick. Appreciate it. 2:58 a.m., Emily. Besides, you're right. 2:58 a.m., Dorian. I am? About what? 2:59 a.m., Emily. You're right, that I would have told her about Jonas if I could have. 2:59 a.m., Emily. By then, she was so hopped up on painkillers that I hardly recognized her, though. 3 a.m., Dorian. The meds must have been pretty heavy. That's a lot to deal with for a 4-year-old kid. 3:01 a.m., Emily. Yeah, her esophageal cancer was bad. She was in a lot of pain near the end. Pretty sure my ass of a father was having an affair at the time, too. 3:01 a.m., Dorian. I'm sorry, that's a shitty memory to bring up. 3:03 a.m., Emily. Don't be. I actually wanted to thank you. It's a memory I'd forgotten. I think I repressed a lot of old memories of her. 3:04 a.m., Dorian. I can't tell if you're pissed or not. Are you sure you're okay? 3:04 a.m., Emily. Yeah. 3:05 a.m., Emily. Honestly, if it wasn't for you, I'd probably think I was going crazy right now. 3:05 a.m., Dorian. What? 3:06 a.m., Emily. I saw her too. 3:06 a.m., Dorian. The smiling woman? 3:07 a.m., Dorian. M? 3:12 a.m., Dorian. Everything okay? 3:23 a.m., Dorian. Who did you see? 3:34 a.m., Emily. I see my mother. I stare at the last word in stunned silence. Her mother? Could she actually have been the origin of the legend? I rub a hand along my jaw, considering what I've heard of Emily's history. She had only been 4 years old at the time of her brother's death, when she witnessed a woman drag him into the sea. Could that woman have been her own mother? Unlikely, but not impossible. Children often reframe moments of terror to understand the incomprehensible. I reach for my briefcase, unclasping the latches on the front, and pull out my laptop. I take a breath, and then open up the database software. Emily's easy enough to find. Her last name is plastered everywhere across her social media, so I plug that in. The search function isn't the fastest, but it does the trick. It takes 30 seconds for the tiny, rotating hourglass to stop spinning, and when it does, I see her. Subject, Emily Caldwell. Father, Hank Caldwell. Mother, Janice Caldwell. Deceased. I swallow, my hands shaking on the keyboard. Had I finally found Jagged Janice? I pour myself a glass of water, finishing it in 2 big gulps. It does little to calm my nerves. Still, it's one piece of the puzzle solved, but really it just creates more questions. It doesn't explain several aspects of the man's story. The water in the lungs, the vanishing. Certain pieces don't add up, at least not when compared against the original legend. I hear a knock on the door. 3 sharp raps with a knuckle. I get up to answer it, thinking maybe the man forgot his phone or wants to give me back my pack of smokes. When I open it, though, there's nobody. I raise an eyebrow and head back to my laptop. I need to discover the source for these changes, these departures from the Jagged Janice mythology. This time I bring up my web browser, navigating to one of my preferred resources on urban legends. The website's a bit corny, but it's proven accurate, and its community aspect has been invaluable in my research. After some scrolling, I bring up the Jagged Janice article. People can leave anecdotal encounters beneath the main text, and sometimes they do. Usually, they're all bullshit, and it's simple enough to tell at a glance, but sometimes. One of them catches my eye. It mentions seeing the serrated smile, the tapping fingers, and that they found their infant child dead, with water in its lungs. I shake my head. Bullshit, clearly. I prayed at least the infant was still alive, or that the poster was some teenager with nothing better to do. I keep scrolling. I see more keywords. There and then gone. Voice like a meat grinder. To the sea with you. I pause, swallowing. To the sea with you. Those were the words the man had mentioned Emily said. Words she remembered when she witnessed her brother being pulled into the ocean. To the sea with you. My mind spins, but a picture is forming. The guttural, difficult to understand voice. The drowned brother. I see you. No, she was never saying, I see you. She was saying, to the sea with you. The man couldn't understand it, though, and he was in such a panic that he defaulted to the simplest phrasing. My heart races. I reach for my phone to make a call, to tell my boss what I found. It wasn't long ago the facility had an incident with a man with a red notepad, one in which we learned the core principle of all legends, and one which cost many people their lives. That legends evolve. If the Jagged Janice legend has evolved, then we need to allocate additional resources to locating it and neutralizing it. I continue to scroll, noticing many of the anecdotes have been posted in the last week. Several in the last few days. If even half of them are true, then it would highly imply increased activity on Janice's part. I hear another knock at the door. 3 soft raps. I curse, kicking off from my desk and storming to the door, phone still pressed to my face, waiting for my boss to pick it up. Once more, I swing it open, and once more, I look down the cold, empty hallway. Nothing. I slam the door shut and stalk back to the table. My phone continues to ring, and my boss continues to ignore my call. It's not really like her, but I tell myself to relax. She's probably in the middle of supper. I check the watch on my wrist and frowned. The display reads 3:34 a.m., which can't be right. It was 6 o'clock only 20 minutes ago.
The mailbox is full and cannot accept any messages at this time. Goodbye.
I heave a sigh, adding broken wristwatch to my list of problems. Three more knocks. I have to confess that I'm getting fed up. I'm gonna leave this here for now, as it appears my interviewee is having some fun at my expense. Either that or... well, that isn't really a possibility I'd like to entertain. On second thought, I'll post this before I go. just in case. Welcome back, my darling deviants. Oh, how wonderful it is that you've made it to the end of this video. Well, first things first, head down to the description and make sure you subscribe to As the Raven Dreams to hear more of his silky smooth cawing, voice. And check out the other works by Bourne Beach, as I may have read in a comment somewhere on the depths of the interwebs that he's planning on creating an anthology series around the facility. Oh, I can't wait. Now, one last thing before I let you go. Have you been brushing your teeth? Seriously, good oral hygiene is of the utmost importance for any ghoul, geist, ghost, friend, or foe. How are you going to chomp down on a screaming victim when gingivitis takes away those pearly whites? You're not. So annihilate that subscribe button, ring that little bell, and get to brushing. I expect a detailed report by our next video. Now go forth, my ghastly gang, and stay spooky.